You mean to tell me that someone down your ancestral line survived being chained to other human bodies for several months in the bottom of a disease-infested ship during the Middle Passage, lost their language, customs, and traditions, picked up the English language as best they could while working free of charge from sunup to sundown as they watched babies sold from their arms and women raped by ruthless slave owners, men emasculated and made a spectacle of, took names with no last names, no birth certificates, no heritage of any kind, braved the Underground Railroad, survived the Civil War to enter into sharecropping, learned to read and write out of sheer will and determination, faced the burning crosses of the KKK, averted their eyes from the black bodies swinging from ropes hung on trees, fought in world wars as soldiers to return to America as boys, marched in Birmingham, hosed in Selma, jailed in Wilmington, assassinated in Memphis, segregated in the South, ghettoed in the North, ignored in history books, stereotyped in Hollywood, and in spite of it all, someone in your family line endured every era to make sure you would get here, and you receive one rejection, face one obstacle, lose one friend, get overlooked, and you want to quit? How dare you entertain the thought of quitting? You will never know who survived from generation to generation so you could succeed. Don't you dare let them down. I've seen some version of that floating around the internet for a few years now. And every time it makes me cringe. Every single time. Um, Now, I'm going to start by saying that I understand that people are inspired by a variety of different things. I do not, there's no skin off my back if that is something that inspires you and gives you fuel to do whatever it is you need to do while you're on this planet. Perfectly fine with me. However, if it doesn't, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Um, a lot of people did not make it through any of that. A lot of people made it long enough to have uh, someone who is an ancestor of yours who birthed you. Were they a whole person by the time they did that? I don't know. A lot of people weren't. In a large part, in the trajectory of, I'm going to speak from the perspective of African descended people on the North American continent because that is my experience, that is my heritage, that is my frame. In that context, a lot of us have magnified that aspect that I just read, that aspect of our struggle and our journey, and have neglected in some ways to talk about the ones that didn't make it all the way, the ones that didn't make it out of any of those eras whole, or may have made it through some of those eras and then one of them broke them. So, people got through enslavement somehow, people got through maybe, Reconstruction somehow, the first Reconstruction after the Civil War. You can Google that if you don't know what I'm talking about. Um, got through that and then were broken by Jim Crow or something, you know. Not all of us made it. Not all of us felt like we were obligated to sit through that struggle or sit through that pain or sit through that harsh reality that we were given. Um, and from a spiritual standpoint for me, what that says is that, of course, again, we have the warriors, we have the people who are frontline, we have the people who are always going to be the ones who are right on the front line, who are, literally fighting, literally uh, putting their bodies between us and or the rest of us and some other oppressive force, things like that. Okay, we definitely have those people who have endured in some way or another. I would venture to say that some of those who did do that also sometimes left the aftermath of a variety of generational trauma, coping mechanisms that turned in on us, that either no longer serve us, no longer work, or are no longer of much use to us, that we have held on to for a little too long, because we have not had the time, the space, the energy, and or the capacity to overall, globally, on a macro level, um, deal with that as a people. So we're still, you know, reinventing the wheel or spinning our wheels in many ways. There's also the thought that, when we talk about vision, when we talk about, not just planning for the next 5 years, 10 years, but planning way, 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 way beyond that. Um, you know, we have to get beyond the survival mentality. You have to get a little bit beyond the warrior mentality. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it doesn't always serve that 100-year plan. It may serve the 1 week plan, it may serve the 2 month plan, it may serve the 5 or 10 year plan, even. But generationally, if that person isn't physically here, then that's a difference. Okay, we all know the power of ancestors and ancestral uh, um, influence on our lives. Perfectly fine. And you want people physically here when we can have them here. That's important. So not all of us made it. Not all of us got through it whole. Not all of us saw this world and decided to stay for a long time. As someone who comes from a family of people who I often, the way I've said it in the past is that may have been a little too soft to live. Um, and I don't mean that in a negative way per se. I just mean that this world can really, really do a number on you, on a certain kind of person, a certain kind of human being. And I come from people who that happened to. Um, I think, in some ways, whether they were really aware of it or not, from the stories that I heard when I was younger, from the ways that I understood some of my folks, things like that. It's just they were they were not quite meant to live in this. Um, and when it got hard, they decided, you know what, in one way or another, whatever hard or difficult or whatever meant for them, in some way, they were like, you know what, I'm out. I'm out. I'm going back home. For those of us who, and I want to speak to this because, again, the keep on going, the push through it, the warrior, the Harriet Tubman, the Nat Turner, those are the things that we hear over and over and over again. And again, like I said, in their way, in their place, in their station, they can be very, very uplifting. Um, but right now, it was on me when I saw this go around again. That statement that I said at the beginning, when I saw that going around again, um, I got kind of hit with what's the other side of that? What's the other side of this? Because this isn't the only way we've survived, and as someone who now that I have an understanding, at least from a certain cultural perspective, about what probably went on in my family, what probably went on with me and my birth and my being here as a human being incarnated in this physical form right now talking to you, um, is that, we need both sides of the coin and we need to develop both sides. Now, I want to say this first and foremost, just because, I know how things are. I don't know how many people are going to see this. Usually, not too many people see what I do. So, just in case this blows up, I want to make it very, very clear from the outset. We're about 10 minutes in. I just, if you need to direct someone to this part of the video, please do. Uh, I am not I am not speaking specifically about anything as specific as suicidal ideation from a purely psychological standpoint. I'm not talking about um, issues of, you know, depression or something like that that may be chemically based or based on some kind of chemical imbalance or brain imbalance or whatever it is. Those are not the kinds of things I'm talking about when I talk about this. So when I talk about leaving and all that other kind of stuff. I'm not discussing, as far as I know, to my knowledge, like no one in my, when I say immediate, I mean from my great great grandmother on down. I don't think anybody literally, committed suicide. That's not what I'm talking about. So I just want to make that very, very clear. Suicide is a very serious issue. It affects so many people. Of course, as spiritual workers, as energy workers, things like that, we do understand from our different cultural contexts, that there are different layers and levels to that problem. But that is not what I'm talking about. So I just want to make that very, very clear. We're not talking about suicide from a purely psychological Western perspective. Okay, that's it. Um, when I say that we need both, that we need both the warriors and we need the warriors and the people who are attached to, in some way, to the systems and the lives that we are living from day to day, because those are the folks who tend to move the gears of things in the day to day. They're the people who tend to get and make and foster the kinds of change that we need in a very tangible, day to day, physical way that allow us to move forward into the future. That's necessary, that's needed. My hat off to, or my head wrap, whatever, off to all of you who do that because it's important and it's key and it's crucial. However, there's another side to that coin that I feel like gets sort of lost. And the other side is the people who are not attached to this life, not in that way. That they see, you know what, it should not be this goddamn hard for us or anybody. All that stuff I said in the beginning, nobody should have had to endure that. That's always in the forefront of my mind. No human being should have to endure genocide. No human being should have to endure enslavement. No human being should have to endure any of it. The fact that we got through it and that, I'm still here, people who look like me are still here. I live in an area where it's mostly people who look like me. It's a, yes, praise everything. It is a huge ass miracle that any of us are here. Ashe, for real. I get that from the bottom of my soul, right? I understand that completely. I also understand that not everybody makes it. And I don't condemn those who didn't for not. And I'm not talking about, and again, I'm not even talking about the ones who, middle passage, whatever, they decided to fall off the side of the boat, like, bye, I see where this is going. I'm not dealing with this. I don't even mean that consciously. I mean with a consciousness of, this isn't cool. I don't have to be here. Um, Let me just go back home and do something else. Do this a different way because this is not working. But for those of us who have that sort of thought process and stay, I find that those are the folks who often are capable or do have that sense of that 100-year plan. Like they don't have that sense of, they kind of erase that, not erase, but they tamp down that sense of, oh, everybody's out to, we're gonna die and, we're at war and da 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 da. Like all of that kind of gets a little bit, it's background noise, it's there. But it's also like, okay, what do we do next? How do we move into the future? how do we look at something different? How do we imagine something different? Because this right here is an amalgamation of somebody's messed up fantasy, and I need to get out of that and create a fantasy that works for the people who look like me and who are, where I am. There are examples of this. Anybody listening to this, if you have not read Octavia Butler, you need to go and do it now. You need to go and get some of her books. There are specials often, especially for the digital versions of her books, but now they have several volumes, like where you can get like one volume of like 3 or 4 books that she's written in the same series. Several of those are available at your local, excuse me, your local independent bookstore. I'm trying to divest from Amazon as much as possible. That's a whole other video. But if you don't want to go to Amazon, there are plenty of independent bookstores that have, her work available. Please read some Octavia Butler. She is amazing at talking about, humanity beyond what this version of our selves have done to each other and what we could do to each other, and also what might lie beyond that. Just about anything you read from her does that. Most people would, in this time, most people would suggest the parable of the sower and the parable of the talents. The parable of the sower is the first one. To me personally, is the superior book. The parable of the talents felt a little forced, I guess you could say. But Parable of the Sower is the one where, if you've seen people quote that, Lauren Olamina, the main character in the book, and that whole thing about change, God is change, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff comes from Parable of the Sower. It is a very, very poignantly true thing right now, because a lot of what she wrote in there is happening in a sense. Not all of it, but a good bit of it. It's like some of the stuff she got exactly right. Some of the stuff was like maybe in like another 20 years, hopefully, if we don't get our stuff together. But in any event, amazing. And some of her, I would say, heiresses in this time, or one of her main heiresses in this time, is Adrienne Maree Brown. She is an amazing writer and thinker, around young-ish. I believe she's younger than me. I don't even think she's my age, but wonderful, wonderful thinker, and just about she and her sister actually did a podcast that was something about the end of the world. I'll post links in the video description. But just wonderful ways of thinking about, like, yes, it's horrible. Yes, it's a dumpster fire. Yes, all these horrible, terrible things are happening. We're not denying that. And this is how we move forward. And not only do how we move forward, this is how we live now. This is what we dedicate ourselves to now. And this is what gets us past this. That's where I am. That's where I am. I'm grateful and thankful and wonderfully inspired, in the sense of, yes, turn the tables over as far as everybody in the street right now, and doing all that kind of stuff. I get all of that and I love it. But as someone who, I studied my undergraduate, I've only gone to undergraduate school at this point, but my undergraduate degree is in psychology and African American studies. So as someone who has, at least in a basic way, you know, looked at the history of us from mitochondrial Eve all the way up to like now, we've reinvented the wheel way too many times. Way too many times. Everybody's like, "Oh, this looks like the '60s," and it does. The '60s and the '70s, it does look like that, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't. It should look like 2020. Instead, it's reminding us of 1960 something or 1970 something, because somehow we're still on the hamster wheel. And I think part of the hamster wheel is because we're so focused on survival. We're still focused in survival mode. We're still focused on, that root chakra, that, all of that. And we're not finding that balance between understanding what's going on, seeing what's going on, being in what's happening and being detached enough to say, you know what, okay, all this is going on. Yeah, they're killing us. I mean, I'm sitting here. I'm here. I'm alive. If you're typing, they're killing us. You're alive too, right? I mean, that's what I mean when we say we have to separate it out just a little bit. Just a little bit. I can't breathe. No, you can breathe just fine. The person that we're mourning couldn't breathe. Separate it out. Not in the sense of not having empathy, not in the sense of not understanding what's going on, but separate it so that you can still think, so that you can still feel not just the rage, not just the pain, but so that you can feel the what's next. Another word on this, and I hope to God I'm making sense. Whoever's going to hear this is going to hear it. So I pray that I'm making sense to whoever's listening. The other side of this, and I know we've talked about this, and we've talked even to the point of the reading of the year and things like that. We've talked about things like the reading of the year from the Yoruba context. We've talked about the ancestors, the importance of ancestors, and things like that. Interestingly enough, in the reading of the year, they also talked about Egbe. And I have long said, even before I knew who and what Egbe was, long before, well before my initiation, one of the things that, when I started working with spirit in a larger way, started doing readings, things like that, or started doing the kind of work where spirits would literally come to me like I'm stuck, and I would have to say or help them move on. And I say ancestors can't do it all because just like some white folk got ancestors that still have them walking around thinking they in the KKK or thinking they can just lynch somebody and not go to jail or thinking they can do whatever, we have a lot of ancestors that are guiding certain people and they think it's all good, but what they really are is keeping them on the plantation mentally because they still scared they're gonna get shot down, like in a very immediate sense. When I say in the sense of an enslaved person who is literally on land that does not belong to them, whose life could literally be taken from them from the person who owns them in real time. There are too many situations where people are being guided by people who are still on that level of spirit, and they should have long past moved past that and moved beyond that, because that is the reality that they are embedded in, or that is embedded in them due to the fact that that's how they lived. But we're not there now, not literally, right? I mean, yes, we have all the other things that are going on, but we are not literally on the plantation. No one owns me today. No one owns you today. Not right now. Not when is this? July 8th, 2020 at about 3:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. No one owns you. That kind of fear, that kind of anxiety, that level of we have to release. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to go into 2050, 2075, 2085, those years that I will not see. But some of you hearing this will. If we're going to get there, we have to put to rest some of that and or do the work to elevate that energy so that those folks who did all that can rest, and that we can start to listen to the energies that are actually trying to tell us and get through to us and say to us, you know what, you were here in the beginning, you survived what you needed to survive, and you will be here in the end, and this is how you do it. We can't hear that if we're still running from Master through the woods, period. When you're down in your root chakra, and I don't do the whole like, oh, these chakras don't matter, these are the only ones that do. If you've read anything I've written or anything like that, you know that's not my line. I don't feel that way at all. However, if you're stuck in survival mode, if you're stuck in fight or flight, if you're stuck in, I gotta eat, I gotta do that, I gotta eat, sleep, get a little loving every now and again, eat, sleep, whatever, If that's all figuratively that you can think about, then that you won't go any higher. You won't go any higher. We have to start thinking in a different way. And that's why I say ancestors can't do it all. Because if we're not, if too many of those kinds of, or, again, doesn't even have to be as far back as enslavement. Could be sharecroppers, could be Jim Crow, could be all kinds of things. It's the level of spiritual, I guess, for lack of a better term, spiritual maturity that's present. That's the issue. Now, when I talk about Egg Bay, the advantage to that dealing with things on that level that are not attached to Earth in the material sense that we are, that are not attached to human life in the mundane sense, like in the day to day, get up, brush your teeth, whatever. Yeah, they didn't for the most part, they didn't live here like that. And there's several energies that didn't. So it's like, they're the ones that are kind of like, well, why don't you do it like this? Well, have you ever tried that? Have you ever tried this? That offer that different perspective, that offer that other layer of inspiration that are going to help us through and allow us to finally, have some kind of plan that's going to take us beyond, you know, the slogan of the day, the hashtag of the day, the latest thing that's happened, the latest person that's been brutalized, or the latest person that's lost their life to these things. Um, that's about as plain in some ways as I can get with it, but bottom line is this really all literally started because like I said, I saw this again and I cringed internally again. Um, and it was literally because it was like, well, what if, what if some of us didn't make it? And it's okay to say that. It's okay to understand that. And it's okay to understand that the reason why they didn't make it is because they understood, or part of the reason may have been not because they were weak or, because they weren't willing to sacrifice some part of being human or some part of joy or some part of bliss or some part of pleasure or some part of the beauty of what could be life to endure and wind up becoming something or someone that they no longer recognized. We don't tell that story enough. We don't talk about that enough. And to some degree that still goes on. I think that a lot of the anxiety, depression, a lot of the things that are going on right now, again, not from a chemical standpoint, but when it comes from like a sort of a circumstantial or trauma standpoint, things like that, is because we don't, we understand that things are messed up. And we're trying to figure out how to live through that and be human through that, be more human through that, be human at all through that, and figuring out how to navigate it. It's not easy. It's not easy. And we don't have, community is shaky, family is shaky, sometimes. There's so many different factors. There's so many different factors. I I just I can't tell that story anymore. I just can't. Now, that's not to say again, like I said, I want everybody to be here. Everybody who's here, for me personally, I feel or not even feel, my strong belief is that if you made it here, if you are here in a human body, you made it here. You have a reason to be here. There's some reason you're here. There's some reason you exist. And that at least the God of my understanding loves you, cares about you, and wants you to live your life and be a whole human being and live in the destiny and the purpose that you are meant to be here and live in. That's why you're here. I don't know what that purpose is. I can't necessarily I can't tell you that. That is way beyond the scope of this video and sometimes way beyond the scope of what another human being can tell you fully. However, that said, it's not always easy. to step into that. It's not always easy to become that, and that's okay. And I think we have to, especially as Black folks, um, we have to really begin to just say that. For me personally, saying that is actually, or understanding that and accepting that was actually very liberating, because it was like then I could kind of get to the other stuff, but I couldn't keep acting like, that was the thing. Like, oh, well, this person made it, that person made it, so I should have made it too. But when I started, again, when I learned my family stories as an adult, breathing and walking around ain't always making it. There's a lot of shells on two legs with breath in their body. So, again, for anybody who finds that inspirational, you probably stopped listening about 28 minutes ago. But for those who don't, I hope that this sparked something for you, um, and maybe gave you a slightly different perspective about maybe why, sometimes we don't make it. It's not easy. We shouldn't have had to endure that. It's okay to need or want to be validated in that. It's okay to understand that mama, daddy, grandmama, great grandmama, great auntie, great uncle, whoever was broken by something and didn't do what they needed to do. They weren't who they needed to be. They did not give you, your mama, your daddy, whoever, the tools that they needed to raise the kind of person that was coming up now, in the 20th century, 21st century, whichever it is. I mean, these are the realities of all of those eras and what they did to us as human beings. It's just the truth. And for me, it's important to divorce ourselves from the glamorization of the struggle enough to get to another way of seeing, of being. Um, yeah, so that's it. Like I said, I hope that makes sense. Anyway, I don't really have, and I won't tell you to subscribe because God only knows when I will do another video. Um, Still writing, kind of, sort of, a little bit at a time. I've had a harrowing couple of weeks. I'm still deciding what to say about that, if I will say anything at all. But I'm fine. Just, stuff happens. So that's it. If this resonates with you, feel free to leave a comment. I am Imperial Insights all over the interwebs, Facebook, Instagram, and so on and such forth. And yeah, we have to expand. We've got a lot of stuff going on right now that's gonna wind up being, this isn't, oh, we're gonna deal with this issue and it's gonna be done. We're gonna deal with that and it's gonna be done. No, these are, and that's part of why, again, the U.S. as a country is failing so hard at this pandemic and things like that, because in a lot of places it got hard and they were like, screw it, just let God sort them out. It didn't have to be that way. It still doesn't have to be that way, but that's what they're making it, because it was too hard to make people do blah 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 blah. So as several folks have been saying, I saw someone say the other day, it sounds like a cliche, but it's damn true. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It may look like the 60s or the 70s right now, but it was not, and that was, a longer period to some degree than, people They think it, now it's compressed because we're seeing in documentaries and things like that. People just think, oh, they had some marches and some stuff happened, and then but societal change, real true change, can take time if the humans involved are wedded to their ways. It takes a while. So pace yourselves, rest when it gets hard, sit down. There's always somebody else that'll take up the mantle when you rest. When you're ready, you can pick it back up. Don't drive yourself crazy with no social media. Don't drive yourself crazy with the news. Stay focused on what's in front of you. Stay focused on where you are as a human being. If you are relatively safe, okay, your people are relatively safe and okay, give thanks for that. Be okay with that and keep it moving. Do not perpetuate the fear. Do not perpetuate the, I will say, unproductive and unfocused and uh, and garden variety anger that doesn't actually do anything, move anything, uh, enlighten anyone. Avoid that kind of anger. The kind of anger that you use, the kind of anger that you actually can turn into something productive, the kind of anger that you can transmute into something else. Fine. Um, and just, look, stay healthy, do what you can, survive. That's it. That's it. Take care of you, take care of your folks, take care of the community that you are capable of caring for, and know that that is enough. Know that you are enough, and it's okay. It's okay. There's a lot of stuff you may have survived that you shouldn't have had to. I'm glad you're here. Hope you stay. Um, and just, like I said, personally, that was the message that I needed to hear to keep going at different points in my life. So I say to you, it's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel that you shouldn't have had to go through that because you shouldn't have. Because humans should not be horrible to each other in all the ways that we tend to be, in all the hierarchies that we tend to, straight people being horrible to gay people, uh, cis people being horrible to trans people, able people being horrible to disabled people, whatever rung of the ladder it's on, we need to stop. Just stop. Because the people who are being horrible to all of us and for all of us are the ones just sitting back, kicking up their heels and laughing at all this shit. So, yeah, I'm gonna really wrap it up there. Like I said, I'm not gonna tell you to subscribe because I don't do these often, but I am. You can find me at Imperial Insights all over the web. Feel free. And if you want to discuss this more, leave a comment. Maybe I'll do a Facebook Live or something. I don't know. I don't do these things often, but I am, praying for everything and everybody all the time. And I just pray that we continue to fight, um, that we continue to survive, that we continue to thrive, that we continue to find bliss and joy and peace and pleasure even in the midst of all this turmoil and upheaval, because it's still there for us even now. So thank you all. Whenever you're watching this, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever it is. And take care of yourself. Okay? Peace.